My name is Peter Stanton. I'm the publisher of the Worcester Business Journal. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our annual economic forecast event that we co-produced with the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. This event has always been one of my favorites because year after year we've been able to attract such really some top shelf speakers. And as you can see in your program, we're fortunate this year to have another all-star lineup in Barry Bluestone, Doug Starrett, Dr. Ralph Lambalot, and in Jim Umphrey. And we appreciate each one of them taking the time to prepare and to be with us this morning. So thank you very much to all of them. I also want to give a quick shout out to former Chamber Head Dick Kennedy, who was extremely helpful in helping us in speaker recruitment. Thank you, Dick, for your help. You know, I called him and I said, you know, once you're in the chamber, you're always sort of a member of the family. I said, Dick, I know this is not a chamber thing, but, you know, it's a little like La Cosa Nostra, right? Once you're in the family, you're in the family. So thank you for your help. This event is made possible by the event teams at the Chamber and at the Worcester Business Journal, but just as importantly, by our many sponsors who want to be involved in supporting and promoting events of this quality, that produce quality programming like this. So I would like to thank our presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Merrill Lynch and Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, our corporate sponsor, Penta Communications, and our supporting sponsor, the Certified Public Accountants and Consultants, the firm Bolus Lynch. So thank you to all of them. And to that end, I'd like to invite up to the podium Michael Garand, who is the Senior Vice President and Private Client Advisor at U.S. Trust Bank of America and is a presenting sponsor for this morning's event. Michael.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. As he said, I'm Mike Garand. I'm a U.S. Trust employee, private client advisor. I want to thank you for the kind introduction. Let me start off by saying that Bank of America's longstanding relationship with the Chamber and the Worcester Business Journal is very much valued. Some of you may have seen our recent branding campaign, We're Better When We're Connected. And I cannot think of two organizations that exemplify that better than the Worcester Business Journal and the Chamber, bringing together key influencers, stakeholders, and public and private collaborations to create business synergies and economic opportunities for the great city of Worcester. Bank of America is part of the fabric of the Worcester and central Massachusetts neighborhoods, and our goal is to help customers and clients live better financial lives. We know we're only as connected and healthy as the communities where we do business and where our 6,000 employees live. I'm joined by several of my Worcester-based colleagues today, many of whom you know, and from our many business lines serving Worcester. I'd like to recognize all of them at the head table here. U.S. Trust, Merrill Lynch, Business Banking, and our banking center managers who are delivering the full capabilities of our bank to Worcester individuals, companies, and institutions every day. Worcester is really a very critical market for us, and we're aligned, and we've aligned our specialists' resources under the longtime leadership of Worcester Market President Ed Shea. I'd like to recognize Ed, who oversees our cross-business line Worcester team, ensuring we provide all the capabilities needed to serve our customers, clients, and community. I'll close by reiterating thanks to everyone, on behalf of all my Bank of America teammates, to the Worcester Business Journal and the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce, and all of you here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you to the Bank of America team as well for your support. Much appreciated. You can also see from your program and from a logo that will appear on the screen that our other presenting sponsor is Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. However, unfortunately, its regional leader, the omnipresent Katie McAvoy, had a conflict she couldn't simply get around this morning. And for those of you who know her, for Katie to miss an event is quite a rare occurrence. It's certainly not a dog ate my homework excuse. So we certainly miss her and certainly appreciate tremendously the support also of Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. So let's give them a hand for their support of this event as well. So next, I'm going to cover an important piece of business here before turning the mic over to Tim Murray, and that is on your table there's a little sheet of paper, and that little sheet of paper asks you four key questions. Barry, I know this is easy for you, but four key questions about the economy. You know, where the stock market, the Dow, is going to be at the end of this year, and where GDP will be, and as well as the unemployment rates in the state and federal. And we asked this question last year at this very event, and what we're going to do here today, and Matt Majakis at the Worcester Business Journal table is going to look for someone's hand to go up if they're the winner. I'm going to mention the top scorers of all the folks who entered this contest last year in about 5 slides, and we're giving a prize to the first place in each of these categories, and then at the end, under the Economist of the Year, which is the best combined score, we're going to recognize the top 3. So, quickly to the slides. This is amazing. We had 32 people enter. The Dow was at 16.5 at the end of this year. Of all the 32 predictions, the highest predictions was 15,659. Cheryl Begin from Bay State Savings Bank. Congratulations, Cheryl. Jeff Turgeon and Matt Shealy. Hey, Matt. There we go, baby. You're in the top 3. So, Cheryl, we have a certificate for you. Next one, federal unemployment rate ended up at the end of the year at 6.7. No one got it on the mark, but Joe Barboza was the closest at 6.6, and it's with John Ware Research Group, and then Andy Cool from JM Cool and Jason Farber from People's United were in the top 3. So congratulations to them. Next. Good stuff. Mass unemployment rate ended up at 7.0. Heather Storm from Digital Federal Credit Union had 6.9, as well as Dennis Irish from Vanguard Health System, 6.9%. So there's a tie for first place, the closest. If either one is here, you're looking for a hand. And next, whoops. Okay, here's a 3-way tie. The GDP ended up growing by 2.4%. No one got it on the button, but Steve Groscher, who I know is sitting back there to the right, Tom Hastings of the Interface Financial Group, and Jason Farber, all were within 1/10 of a point. So congratulations to them, a 3-way tie for first place. And here's the grand overall. Who is it but the retiring Roberta Schaefer from the Research Bureau, finished with the low score across all 4 categories. Is Roberta here? She is. Congratulations. Stand up. There we go. And we have a restaurant gift certificate for the top 3, and that's Roberta, Andrew Sullivan from Wayside Wealth Management, and Tom Hastings from the Interface Financial Group. And their scores were 36, 38, and 43, which is where they finished in each of the 4 categories. So anyways, exciting stuff. Please fill that slip out today. You can tell it's a bit of a wild guess, but we're also going to be posting those 4 questions online so that we get a lot more entrants next year, and we can have some fun with this again. So, okay. The only other housekeeping thing I want to say is there's a postcard on your table, and when the speakers have all spoken, or while they're speaking, you may have some questions that you want to ask them. The method we've used here for the last few years successfully was you fill out those cards with a question. We'll collect them at the front of the room while folks are speaking, and then our moderator will have those questions with him as we get into the Q&A session at the end. So please fill those out as we go, and as we get towards the end of the speaking, we'll be going around and collecting them, and we'll bring them up front to have for the Q&A part of the session. So, okay. It is now my pleasure to turn over the proceedings to Tim Murray, the President and CEO of the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. Tim, it's your show.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. It's been great to combine the teams of the Worcester Business Journal and the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce in helping bring to you the 2014 economic forecast. I also want to thank our sponsors who have helped make this morning happen, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, and Peter mentioned Kate McAvoy, one of the members of the board of the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Ed Shea is also a member of our board. Penta Communications and Bolish Lynch, who with Bolus, we have a chance to work with Mike on the WBDC board. Part of the reason why we're here is to talk about a new partnership that has grown out of the Economic Development Coordinating Council, which is a weekly, really, engagement of the City of Worcester and the local business organizations working together and collaborating, each with their own unique, distinct roles, but also with an overall goal about moving the economic development agenda for the region. And that is the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce, the WBDC, MBI, the city, Destination Worcester, and others. And much of what we're going to talk about in the slides today will help us focus that work and take the effort of the Economic Development Coordinating Council and all of our stakeholders, including our 5 affiliate chambers, to the next level. But to start off with a little bit of fun to kind of demonstrate that collaboration to date, there's a little video from the City of Worcester put together showing some of the projects that people in this room and the organizations that I mentioned have helped make happen.
Now there was a time when you loved me so I couldn't go wrong. Now you need to know. So how you like me now? 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 How you like me now?
No running through walls quite yet, but it's great to see some of that work that so many people have taken part of. And that work continues, and it's about taking it to the next level. That is what the Chamber has been designated to do in terms of the business recruitment. We are organizing our work under 3 themes: recruit, retain, and incubate, and have been designated by our partners in the EDCC to lead the business recruitment side. And in that effort we wanted to do an analysis of where the economy has been, where it is now, and project as best as we can with data and information on where it's going in the future. And that's really what the Worcester Regional Economic Competitiveness Forecast is all about. Just to go to our slides here, we got bingo. Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce, and I'm surprised at how many people don't know this, but it's the largest chamber in New England, and it comprises the 5 partner affiliates, the Auburn Chamber of Commerce, Blackstone Valley Chamber of Commerce, the Webster Dudley Oxford Chamber, the Central Mass South Chamber, and the Wachusett Area Chamber of Commerce. 2,300 members and growing, and it is about making the case regionally because we don't, as we know, necessarily compete on city and town borders. We compete as regions, and Barry can talk about that, I'm sure, in terms of the distinct regional economies that we hear. What does our report show? Well, the high level, the Worcester region is growing. The Worcester region is cost competitive, accessible, young and educated, and thriving. And the data that was used in this study were from demographic, workforce, and business sector data, census data as well, from the City of Worcester, looking at the City of Worcester and Greater Worcester County. The study revealed some exciting things. First, the region is well positioned to compete for business with Boston and Metro West. Second, the most likely business growth opportunities will come from cutting-edge companies in innovation sectors, which have really been transformative over the years and increasingly will be in Worcester and the region. Third, Worcester has a unique value proposition that is not widely understood, and that is also a major effort of our business recruitment focus, is to educate key decision makers. And as I've said in interviews, as we talk about the business recruitment effort, we're going to strike out 7 or 8 out of 10 times. But batting 300 isn't a bad thing. But in each and every one of those meetings, we're going to have the opportunity, people in this room are going to be part of those teams, to let business leaders, governmental leaders, and others to know what exists in Central Massachusetts, raise their awareness about the opportunities and the value proposition. And as you can see, with some of the population data, a younger workforce is going to be increasingly important. But Worcester in the region is growing. Between 2000 and 2010, Worcester experienced greater population growth than Boston or Massachusetts and a higher growth rate of families than Boston or Massachusetts. In fact, in 2010, 18.2% of Worcester's population was age 0 to 14, which represents a higher percentage of young people than Boston or Massachusetts. Over the decade, Worcester's employment rate also increased twice that of the state. And households in the higher income brackets grew faster than in Worcester in the region in Massachusetts than Massachusetts as a whole. The number of households earning $75,000 or more per year grew by 66% over the decade in Worcester, and households in the highest income bracket, $200,000 or more, grew by 147%. These growth figures are important. They mean that young people and families are staying here or moving here, supporting a strong pipeline for current and future employment, and incomes are increasing, making it easier to attract retailers, restaurants, and others things that spur private investment and new development. Worcester is cost competitive. There's no question when looking at this compared to other regions of the state, cost of living that is lower than Boston, Merrimack Valley. Our workforce and workforce costs in the form of wages are lower than Boston and Massachusetts as a whole, and real estate costs are less expensive than in Boston or in the Metro West region, an area where we will be and are competing directly for business. Worcester is accessible. Planes, trains, automobiles. We haven't got the canal boats yet, but they're coming. Simply put, Worcester is easily accessible. And this map, I think, shows how within a short period of time in various modes of transportation, people can be in a lot of different places. Our central location provides ready access to potential customer base of 8 million people within a 75-mile radius of the city. Worcester is young and educated. In comparison with the state as a whole, as I mentioned, our workforce is younger. Nearly 1/3 of Worcester's workforce is 34 years or older, 34 years old or younger, and nearly half is 44 years or under. We have a higher population of 0 to 14-year-olds than Boston or the state, which means we have a robust homegrown pipeline for future employment. And 1/3 of Worcester residents have bachelor's degree or higher, which is consistent with the national average. While we are competitive today, improving graduation rates in workforce training is a priority for the region, and it will be a priority of the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. Worcester's innovation economy is thriving. When you look at the innovation sectors, and we're here just a stone's throw away from the Biotech Park and UMass Memorial in the med school, thanks to those partners, WPI, Kevin O'Sullivan's group at MBI, we are home to exciting clusters of science, technology, and research. Between 2000 and 2010, Worcester's employment grew twice as fast as Massachusetts in this innovation. Our manufacturing sector, which is part of that innovation, was 2.4 times stronger than Suffolk County. Our education and healthcare sector grew by 35.5%. In our professional, scientific, and technical sectors grew by 32.6% across the county. Specifically, the computer systems design sector, which includes video game design, grew by 46.3%. Our performance over the decade was very strong in the innovation sectors, and it is expected and projected to continue. Targeted business recruitment sectors, that roadmap that I spoke about. Through an analysis of economic performance over the decade between the last 10 years, existing characteristics of the region, and the state's industry growth projections for Central Mass, there are three that we've identified. As you can see here, these sectors are education and healthcare, manufacturing, professional, scientific, and technical. What do the growth sectors care about? Key factors for business recruitment: workforce, cost, ease of doing business, clusters, location, and access. These growth sectors care about the availability of workforce, the cost of doing business, clusters, and location and access. How do key factors align with the region's assets? One area for the region to work on is improving the ease of doing business in our region, and specifically, how do we do that? What we can do is several things. To improve the ease of doing business in our region, municipalities should consider adopting 6-month permitting. The City of Worcester was the first community in the Commonwealth to do so in 2007, and 8 other communities within the Greater Chamber region have followed suit, and we have identified 20 43D pre-permitted pad-ready sites across the region. The Chamber hopes to lead and challenge our partners in a good way at the municipal level to double that number by 2015, so that when we're out talking to companies about growing and expanding, we have a portfolio of sites that are predictable and that they know they can grow on without having to deal with some of the uncertainties. Similarly, we need to do a better job of identifying those development-ready sites, designating single points of contact in each one of those municipalities, posting applications and fee schedules online, creating business guidebooks, and helping business comply with local rules and regulations. These are some of the widely accepted best practices, and we need to make them just an ordinary course of business, of doing business in our communities in the region. Another way for municipalities to support business recruitment to the area through enhanced cost competitiveness is helping reduce tax liability. The chart shows the commercial tax rate for the communities that make up the Chamber's membership area. There are 5 communities in the region that rank among the top 100 commercial tax rates in the state. They are Worcester, Hopedale, Auburn, Sturbridge, and Paxton. Worcester's tax rate ranks 31 highest in the state, only 35 cents lower than Boston, the state's 29th highest rate. We've made some progress, but we've got to continue, and really it should not be a conversation that just takes place in October and November. Everybody in this room has a chance, and through the course of events and things, to come across and have conversations with members of our city council. I think it is important that we remind them that this is a challenge in some of these communities, Worcester being one of them, in terms of where businesses decide to grow and expand. Enhanced cost competitiveness. I mentioned the recommendations. Clearly, the tax rate is one of those things that we need in a number of communities to do better on. We also want to put more tools in the toolbox. We need more communities taking advantage of tax increment financing. Also, the Chamber has begun conversations with members of the city administration and council, and today we'll be asking the city council to take up consideration of local adoption of a research development tax exemption, which affords research and development firms the same tax relief as which manufacturers currently enjoy, which is hopefully a way to further accelerate that innovation sector, that R&D, which is critically important. And when you look at the average median wage in those areas, it's close to $70,000. Those are jobs that we need to create more of. We've got some momentum around it in those areas because of our innovation sectors, but we think this is another tool in the toolbox that we want the council to do their due diligence and explore and hopefully adopt. Worcester clearly has many assets. Where can we improve? A lot of very positive things in the report, and we're just trying to laid out there at a high level. But one area where we need to improve, and I think this chart underscores it, is that the number of households earning between $15,000 and $74,000 decreased over the last 10 years by 11.3%. And this income group represents 53% of the population of the city of Worcester. And these are the jobs that give people toeholds into the middle class that we need to make sure that when people look at this chart, and if you could see where we've got, I mentioned the 66% increase in $75,000 and above, but when you look in the middle, that is where we've had a challenge, $15,000 to $75,000. We know those jobs exist. From talking to our members every day, jobs in those areas exist. And I guess why is this happening? Well, they're underserved groups, long-term unemployed, unskilled workers, immigrant populations, but how do we plug them in a timely fashion? And while Worcester, in so many different levels, and has been recognized, we've got collaboration in our genes here, as Chancellor Collins and others like to say, collaboration doesn't always mean we get the results that we want or have to have. And I mean this collectively, we need to do a better job as it relates to workforce training and bringing all of the stakeholders together to say, how are we meeting the needs of the employer community? Are we being nimble enough? Are we getting the skills? That some of this suggests that we need to do a better job, and we need to measure it. And how do we do that? We need to make sure that we've got a designated lead organization. We're not competing in the same space, and in so have that accountability system. Create that continuum, so depending where someone's at, a laid-off worker, long-term unemployed, somebody who English is a new language, that they can plug right in and have the continuum to get into the workforce and work up the ladder. Next, our chamber recruitment strategy, which I talked about. Hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll be announcing a new position of Director of Business Recruitment. With that, we'll be working closely with April Anderson, who prepared this report, and her team, along with the Economic Development Coordinating Council, to target companies that are growing and expanding, to talk to the real estate development community, commercial real estate brokers, site selectors, the venture capital community, trade groups and associations, to try to make the case and raise awareness and recruit businesses to the region. And we're excited about that mission and confident that we can make progress. The conclusions of the report, I would just say in summation, we are going to help coordinate and lead that effort. There are tremendous assets that we have, but what is clear is that we need to do a better job of communicating that to decision makers in the business community and in other important places. Why Worcester? Worcester's growing, cost competitive, accessible, young and educated. Our economy is thriving, but needs to do better. And we look forward to working with our partner stakeholders to help implement the recruit, retain, incubate strategy to grow jobs for Worcester and Central Massachusetts. And I want to thank, again, our team and that of the Worcester Business Journal to putting together this forum and a blueprint for the future. Thanks. Now it is my pleasure, after I was reminded, to introduce Barry Bluestone. I'm not going to get into Barry's bio in a detailed way, but Barry Bluestone runs the Dukakis Institute at Northeastern University, really looking at important public policy issues and economic development for all of Massachusetts. And what I particularly appreciate about Barry is that he is somebody, maybe not a Massachusetts native, but having grown up in Detroit, Michigan, having worked in the manufacturing sector, he has paid particular attention to the Massachusetts economy as a whole, not just one that is focused in and around the Northeastern campus or Boston. And in the reports that have come out over the years that through Barry's leadership from Northeastern, they really help people better understand the Massachusetts economy and the distinct regional nature of it. And he's been able to engage the private sector, leaders in government at different levels, and in academia to come up with plans and use that data to drive an agenda. And whether it be the manufacturing staying power report back in 2007, 2008, the subsequent report following the Great Recession, which showed that manufacturing was stabilizing and growing again. He really takes the time and really works to fully understand the whole economy. And as Harry Truman said, the only thing that's new in this world is the history you don't know. And when you look at the growth patterns of this state, it really is important that we incorporate various regions into the greater Boston economy, which is the economic engine. But Worcester has a real opportunity to be a part of that and complement that, but also be distinct and unique on our own. And Barry, in so many different ways, is looking to make those connections, not just kind of in a academic, professorial way, but in a real, tangible way that makes a difference for communities and families and workers on the ground. So it's my pleasure to introduce Barry Bluestone.
Well, that is a pretty kind introduction, Tim, and thank you so much. And thank you to the Worcester Business Journal and the Chamber for all the work they're doing. You know, when I started my career way back, when I first got to Boston in 1971 from the University of Michigan, which, by the way, will be playing Harvard this week in March Madness. I'm going to have a team favorite there. When I first got here to Massachusetts in 1971, coming from Detroit, Michigan, I was absolutely surprised by the fact that I was going from what was one of the richest cities in the country and had been the richest city in the world in the 1950s to a city and a region that was in fact doing very poorly. Boston's unemployment rate was high, Massachusetts' unemployment was high, the cities outside of Boston, the Lawrences, the Lowells, the Worcesters, the Springfields, were all in big trouble. And that surprised me, coming from Detroit, which by the 1970s was beginning to face the import competition. Well, we've seen the phenomenal changes in our region over that time, and cities and counties like Worcester have been leading that change, as we've seen. When I first arrived here, I taught at Boston College, actually for almost 16 years. I went to UMass Boston to set up the first public policy Ph.D. program, and then 15 years ago, this year, we're celebrating a big anniversary celebration on June 23rd at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. We came and we set up the Center for Urban and Regional Policy, which was then renamed the Kitty and Michael Dukakis Center in 2008. When I first started coming here, I was doing a lot of work internationally. I was spending time in Europe, I was spending time in Japan, I'd been to China. And then I started doing a lot of work in the nation. In 1995, I was down working in the Capitol as special policy advisor to the Majority Leader of the House, Dick Gephardt. And over the last decade or so, I have moved from looking at the globe to looking at the nation to looking at the state, and now looking at local communities. Just last night, I addressed the Sudbury Town Council about the Saugus Town Council and what they're doing. Over the last 2 years, I have spent, I've driven over 21,000 miles, Tim, in Massachusetts. Only once did my car leave here to go all the way to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And I've been in 60 different communities, so I've had a chance to really take a look at what's going on at the ground level, like you're doing here in Worcester. But what I was asked to do was to take a look, first of all, at the national economy, bring it down to the state, down to the county, down to the city, and that's what I've put together for you this morning. So if we take a look at just the gross domestic product in real dollars, in constant dollars, you'll see what has happened in terms of the nation coming out of the Great Recession, the worst recession we'd had since the Great Depression of the 30s, that you see from January '08, as the economy just plummeted, and we were on the verge of disaster, and then you've seen the steady improvement over that period of time. During that period of time, you'll see just over the last 3 years, you'll see the annual average growth by quarter to quarter GDP growth, and you'll see that we've had a reasonably good response, although many of those quarters are under about a 3% growth rate, which we really need for the kind of recovery if we're going to get our unemployment rate down to the 5% region and get long-term unemployment rate down. So you'll see 3% is what we need, about a 2% productivity growth per year, about 1% growth in the labor force. We need just that to cover and keep us from having unemployment rise. We've also seen weaker consumer incomes than we would have liked to see. Household incomes have stagnated. The result is that for some time, we saw a very sharp decline in consumption, which helped lead us into that Great Recession, particularly with the asset losses that people had on their own homes. So even if they were fully employed, making a good living, they felt poor. Because in other parts of the country, much more so than here, you would lose 40, 50, in Las Vegas, 60% of your home value in about 2 years. And even though you still had a good job, you felt poor and you stopped buying. Consumption drives about 2/3 of the economy, so when personal incomes are low or your wealth effect cuts in, consumption goes down. What you see here is that over the last 4 months that we have data, real disposable personal income actually fell in October, but spending rose as people began to use their credit cards again, began to use their savings. That continued in November with a slight growth in personal incomes. December wasn't such a hot month. We saw a decline relative to other months in both income and consumption. And then January 14, we began to see some real improvement with growth in both disposable income and spending. That's good news, okay? Here is what the Congressional Budget Office has projected all the way out to 2025. This is our GDP, and you'll see what the potential GDP would be. That is, if we're at relative full employment and we continue to have productivity growth of about 2% a year, that dark blue line shows us what we should have expected in GDP growth. Our actual GDP is in the lighter gray line, and therefore you can see, beginning in 2008, that sharp departure from potential GDP, and we're fighting our way back to get back onto that growth trajectory. But it won't be until 2017, 3 years from now, that even the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, projects that we'll be back on that growth path that we were on from 2000 to 2008. Okay? This is what it looks like in terms of a forecast made a couple of years ago by CBO. And you'll see what happens is that you'll see that giant dip, the Great Recession in terms of real gross domestic product. Then we came back at about a 2% range, right? We had a little dip in 2013 in the first 2 quarters. Then we've been coming back strongly. That red dot is where we are today, first quarter 2014. And the projection is that we're going to have some really nice growth over the next 12 to 16 months. And then we'll begin to get back to kind of a normal GDP growth rate, but finally ending up at about 2.1 to 2.2%. Not quite as strong as we've had in the past, but a pretty steady growth out to 2022. Okay? So what does this translate into employment? Here you see employment going back to 1981. You'll see nice steady growth, then again the Great Recession, and now we're just getting back to the employment level we had in 2008, 6 years later. Normally it takes us 2 to 3 years to get back after a recession, 2001, 2002, 1991, 92, and so forth. This has taken us a long time. This is a close-up view of that last piece. So you can see how strong that recession was, and we have this recovery coming through. But even by 2014, nationally, we're not back to where we were before the Great Recession. And that's why you see the Fed, for example, announcing yesterday when Janet Yellen announced it, that they're going to continue to keep interest rates relatively low, although they're cutting back on their stimulus to $55 billion a month, because this unemployment problem persists nationwide, more so in other parts of the country. If you woke up this morning, you saw that the unemployment rate for the state came out yesterday at 6.5%. It dropped 0.4 of a point in a single month. We're now back below the national level and growing well. One of the things that troubles some economists is the dropping labor force participation rate. Part of that is related to people like myself. I'll turn 70 this year. I'm going to continue to work, but probably not full-time for the next, for the next few years before I retire permanently. But you'll see this decline of about 1.4 percentage points in the labor force participation rate between 2000 and 2008. And since the Great Recession, it has fallen very dramatically. people finding it difficult to work, retiring early, people who aren't of retirement age dropping out of the labor force, which we haven't seen that before. That's why the workforce development and other things that Tim talked about are so important to get people back into the labor force. If you look at the civilian unemployment rate, it peaked out at 10% in October of 2008. Nationwide, it's come down to actually today, 6.7%. Beginning in 2014, however, we still have over 10 million people out of 130 million in the labor force who are unemployed, and that's why we still have to worry about that problem. Okay? Projections were made by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2010 showing that the unemployment rate would fall. It would come back around 2013 and then continue to fall where it would come down to under 6% out by the latter part of this decade and into the early decade. We're actually doing better than that two-year-old projection. The dots that you see there show you the unemployment rate. So actually we've seen a better decline in unemployment than was projected 2 years ago, and I would argue a lot of that has to do with the monetary stimulus that we've had from the Fed in the absence of more fiscal stimulus from the Congress and the President. But it has gotten us to a lower unemployment rate than we would have otherwise expected. But the problem we have, and you see it in Worcester, you see it elsewhere, is that labor income as a share of GDP has been declining. We expect it to rise a little bit in the second half of the decade, but that decline means that people have less income to spend, and with less income to spend, that means we have slower GDP growth. So getting incomes up again and being able to reward workers with better incomes will actually generate a faster growth in the GDP and will bring down unemployment. It's a big, big circle. So that's the U.S., growing slowly, but growing, and likely to continue to grow. So if I were to fill out this form, I would put down a higher Dow Jones, a lower unemployment rate by the end of this year, a higher GDP than we have now, and probably a GDP rate of somewhere of 2.8 to 3% by the end of the year. That would be my guess. Good news, I'd like to just see it happen fast. I see you all writing down. Do not trust economists on this, right? The people you want to talk about with this are not economists, they're psychologists. Psychologists know better about these things than we do. Okay, so let's look at the Massachusetts economy. Whoops. We're doing better than the country. The bars are Massachusetts. The green line is, or blue line is the U.S. in terms of GDP growth. And we saw last year some forecasts that showed us growing, and we met those targets and actually exceeded it. And these are the latest numbers that just came out last week from my colleague at Northeastern, Alan Clayton Matthews, who is essentially the chief forecaster for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, sits on the Council of Economic Advisors, and he projects that by the time we look at the data for the quarter ending next week, January through March of 2014, we will have seen a growth rate of 5% in Massachusetts. That's roughly double what's going on nationwide. We're now leading, not lagging. And even in the second quarter of this year, he projects a 4.7% GSP, gross state product growth rate. That's very, very exciting. We're doing very well, and we see it in one sector after another that's coming back in the life sciences, in health, in education, in manufacturing, and that's what's driving that. Okay? Massachusetts suffered like the rest of the country during the Great Recession. We saw our employment plummet from about 3.3 to 3.16 million workers. But now we've finally gotten to the point where we've essentially recovered all the jobs we lost, and we're back ahead of where we were at the beginning of the Great Recession, unlike the rest of the country. And we now project that by the end of this year, by November or December this year, Massachusetts will set an all-time historical record for the highest employment ever. We will have recovered everything we lost in the 2000-2001 recession, everything we lost in the Great Recession that began in 2008. That's good news, and it's happening all across the Commonwealth. Okay? So let's get down to the county. So I take a look, and we bring our microscope down from the nation to the state to the county. What does that look like? Well, back in 2001, What led the county in terms of number of establishments? It was retail trade, it was services, all kinds of services, legal services, accounting services. It was construction, and it was professional and technical services, including temporary jobs. That's where we were in the county. If you take a look at the change in the number of establishments in the county between 2001 and last year, overwhelmingly in healthcare and social services, a proliferation of small social services and healthcare providers, right? Those can be individual doctors' offices as well. So we are transforming this county's economy into one that's on the cusp, on the leading edge of healthcare, social services, also hotel and food service, like this wonderful Hotel Beechwood, and then professional and technical services of all kind. You know, we think of Worcester, when I think about it in my cognitive map of Worcester, I think manufacturing. That's still very important here. But you're making the transformation faster than anywhere else in the state to the 21st century economy, okay? So you saw very rapid growth in employment, added 16,000 jobs in healthcare and social services, another 9,000 in educational services, another 4,000 in hotels, restaurants, and other accommodation. That's where your growth is, and it's a good place to be growing, okay? Let's bring it down to the city of Worcester, okay? So in 2013, at the end of last year, you had just under 100,000 people working inside the city of Worcester. And the largest growth, the largest number, actually almost 1/3 of those workers were working in healthcare and social services, 31%. 16% were in educational services. So between those two, health, education, and social services, half of all Worcester employment were in just those sectors. Rather stunning. Rather stunning. Leading. You'd think about that for Cambridge, where I live, or you'd think about that in the Longwood medical area in Boston. You are leading here. Okay? But overall, if you look at the 20 working cities that the Boston Federal Reserve Bank has been following, Worcester being one of them, you fall kind of in the middle of it. Actually, the greatest growth occurred between 2001 and the second quarter of last year. The last data we have from the state was actually in Chelsea. Surprised the heck out of me. And Haverhill and Lawrence. They've actually had greater employment growth. The state only grew by about 0.7%. The city of Worcester saw a loss of about 3.8%. So there's still a lot of work to do in the city of Worcester, despite all the other good news we have. By the way, truth in packaging, truth in advertising, I am at the Boston Federal Reserve Bank now. I did my sabbatical there, and I've been doing analysis for them. So if you want to know, if you'd put down here, for example, what the interest rate will be, the national interest rate will be, I can tell you that because I'm actually going to be setting that. Right? Finally, we've just done a big analysis of 50 communities in Massachusetts. As Tim Murray pointed out, the Dukakis Center has been working with communities all across the Commonwealth. And one of the things that we developed, and Worcester was one of the early ones to take part in this, was something we call the Economic Development Self-Assessment Tool. The idea behind this was to help municipalities, cities and towns, get a better idea of what it takes to be successful at economic development, to attract firms, to retain firms, to build their employment base. We started that project by actually having focus groups with location and site specialists, folks whose expertise is used by firms to decide where to set up a new commercial operation, a retail operation, or a manufacturing facility, or a testing lab. We asked them what's important. Based on that, we went out and we surveyed 230 of the top location experts in the country and asked them what was important. And from that, we then created a survey called the Economic Development Self-Assessment Tool, a survey with over 220 questions, which now 90 cities and towns have taken part in, 60 of those in Massachusetts, which give us an idea of what communities are doing in terms of promoting growth. By the way, as you'll see in a second, everything you're doing in Worcester, you're doing right. We wanted to know about crime rates. We wanted to know about labor force quality. We wanted to know about highway access, access to airports, how long it takes to get a zoning appeal through, how long does it take a building inspection. We asked a lot of questions. We got the data back. And what I've been doing at the Fed is saying, okay, we heard from the location specialists as what they think is important. What actually correlates with establishment growth? Which of these 220 variables brought down to 26 different measures on location are most critical? And the results have just come out. You're the first to see them. The factor that was more important than anything else among the 50 Massachusetts cities that had finished this as of last September, they're now over 60 and we'll add another 10 this spring, the factor that was most important in correlating with establishment growth in a community was economic development marketing. How well you do as a chamber, how well you do as a city in marketing your community to other firms. I was blown away by this. I thought things like crime rates would be most important, or highway access. The second most important factor, and this is why I'm thrilled that you're working on it on this issue, is the timeliness of approvals. What we learned from the location specialists when we did the focus groups and then the surveys, they kept talking about time to market, time to market. How quickly can we get up and running in a particular community to get our product out the door? And the way I think about that is I often will hold up my iPhone and say, you know, how many of you have an iPhone in the room? How many have a Samsung Galaxy? How many have a BlackBerry? 1, 2, 3. The problem with BlackBerry is they now have a touch screen, but they came out too late with it. They're out of business, essentially. That's true of more and more businesses. Time to market is important. Anything that slows you down, they said, is going to harm you. Parking is important. We found that out. Public transit turns out to be very important. Cross-marketing was the fifth most important. Cross-marketing is when the business community and municipal leaders work together, as you're doing here in Worcester, in promoting the community and promoting this as a good place of doing business. Traffic congestion turns out to be important. Fast-track permitting, again, one of those things. Can you get permits through quickly? And, of course, having sites available. That's what matters today. And the top two, economic development marketing and timeliness of approvals, are going to be critical as you march forward. Whatever you can do working together to make that important. It turns out that certain factors that I thought would be really important turn out to be secondary. The location specialist told us this, and it turned out to be true in the statistical modeling. I thought that property taxes would be the highest, among the highest. I thought crime rates would be among the highest. I thought highway access would be among the highest. They turned out to be less important. They're not unimportant, but much less important than what you do with economic development marketing, the timeliness of approval, the cross-marketing you do. The good news is, here in Worcester, you've got forces, particularly in terms of your chamber, in terms of your municipal government, and in terms of the Worcester Business Journal, that are working hard on exactly what will make Worcester prosperous and lead the Commonwealth in the future. Thank you very much. Let me just give you then some final advice, okay? I'll go through this very quickly. Economic development is a collaborative process. You need to build strong adaptive economies with rising federal deficits, with the structural budget deficits of the state. You guys are on your own. Your best way to do your future here is to work at the local level to attract business enterprise. Take whatever deal breakers you have, turn them into deal makers. And the deal breakers are ignorance of a changing market conditions, time to market, uncorrected cognitive maps. People still have an old-fashioned view of what Worcester was. You have to continue change it to what Worcester is today and what it will be in the future. Sometimes too little attention to site deficits, slow municipal process, too much reliance on tax breaks. So, you got to become the CEO for economic development. Municipal leaders must initiate and support the development process. You began by assessing your community's strengths and weaknesses, as we do with EDSAT. You change what you have control over and collaborate with others regionally over what you can influence. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Rick Saya. I'm the editor of the Worcester Business Journal. It's time now to introduce the three men will be on our panel for our panel discussion this morning. And if each of you could please come up to the dais while I introduce you. First, I'd like to introduce Doug Starrett, the president and CEO of the L.S. Starrett Company in Athol. Next is Dr. Ralph Lambalot. He's the Vice President of Biologics Development and Manufacturing Launch at AbbVie here in Worcester. And finally, Jim Umphrey, who is Principal at Kelleher and Sadowski Associates here in Worcester. Okay, and now each of our panelists will be making some brief remarks, and I'll start with Doug Starrett.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Chris Prosser. She was very involved in this. If you don't know Chris, you should make time to introduce yourself. But her entire staff and the Worcester Business Journal, I'd like to thank for organizing this event, and particularly all the behind-scenes things that go on to put this on. Rick, thank you for the kind introduction. I wish my wife was here to read the bio. Her words of encouragement today was, no one's interested in your political views. And I'll try to keep my political views to a few comments later on in your presentation. You know, all I've done for 37 years is work in the manufacturing sector. You know, my view of the world is colored by that experience. I love the business. I love the team that I work with and the people I've met in the manufacturing business. In fact, that's how I met Dick Kennedy, who twisted my arm to come down and do this today. Dick was running Norton at the time. I used to like to tell everybody his entertainment budget was bigger than my profit line. I believe in a strong and vibrant manufacturing base. It's critical for the health of the country. The manufacturing sector, I believe, is the most additive sector in the economy. I'm going to give you just a quick rundown, try to run you through what we do at the company. And just these slides here.
Green button.
The green button. All right. This is the founder of the company. I've got a couple of comments I'd like to make about L.S. Starrett. He founded the company with one product, the combination square, and really spawned the business here in north central Massachusetts. His words, very simple words, but I think in today's world, they mean more than anything today, and particularly when you take a look at the struggles we've had with a very anemic job recovery. And it's a philosophy that we try to live by every day. For those of you who are in the accounting community, I always like to wave the combination square in front of my auditors when they talk to me about an E&O reserve. We're still selling that product today. Today, the company has 1,800 employees worldwide. We're a $250 million manufacturer of almost 5,000 products for the industrial, consumer, and the consumer markets. The company is publicly traded. We're on the New York Stock Exchange, have been public since a very good year, 1929. Our workforce numbers 600 in Massachusetts. We've been an integral part of not only north central Massachusetts, but the whole manufacturing base for 134 years. Just so you know, we put about $2 million of payroll on the streets each week, and isn't that what the free enterprise system is all about? We go to, whoops, Can I back that up? We go to business with two product groups under one brand. Metrology products, which are measuring tools and measuring related products, and saw products. One thing that we are very cognizant of in this region, and I'll talk to you more about the metrology business because that's what most of you know us for around the community here and in north central Massachusetts. But I do want to tell you that saw business is a huge part of our business globally, and I'll talk about that in a minute. These are our global facilities. We manufacture precision tools in Athol, Massachusetts. Primary standards, for those of you who don't know, anybody that's in the calibration business has to calibrate their products. We make the finest primary standards in the world, and that's in Cleveland, Ohio. Waite Park, Minnesota is a custom granite facility I'll talk about later. Laguna Hills, California, we make vision product, which is camera-based inspection. In Mount Airy, North Carolina, we have a major saw plant that services most of North America. And our recent acquisition in Columbus, Georgia makes laser products, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that later on. The plant in Sao Paulo, Brazil, we started there in 1956. We're not new to the international manufacturing game, obviously. We make saws and hand tools there. Jedburgh, Scotland, as you can see, makes saws and optical profile projectors. That was started in 1958. We opened up our plant in China in 1997. We make a full range of products in China that encompass both saws and precision measuring tools. We have a number of distribution centers around the world, and those are highlighted in black. Distribution. Distribution is key to our success. We bring most of our products to market through distribution. As Dick certainly knows, industrial distribution has been an important part of our business, but we sell to all these different distribution channels around the world. Industrial is a big part of our business globally, but we sell through specialist distributors for high-end metrology. Catalog houses, if you guys are familiar with W.W. Grainger, Fastenal, a major component of our business. Retail, particularly in South America, is a big distribution channel for us, and obviously the construction hardware trades. Online business is increasingly important for the company. If you had told me 8 years ago we'd be selling Amazon, I would have said we'd never sell a book reseller. 5 years ago, they did about 400,000 with us, and they'll exceed 4 million with us this year. Brand trust. We've been around for a long time, and we preach this to all our employees. Anytime our brand comes in contact with the individual, we want to make sure it's a positive experience, and I think we've been pretty successful at that for a very, very long time. Everybody in this room understands that digital marketing is becoming more important in marketing your business around the world. We're spending increased amount of time in digital marketing. I showed this simply because it was a fun piece we did with a local technical school at Monty Tech with their students who they wanted a tool donation from the company, and we thought that they could earn credits to do that by using digital media, and we were happy to sponsor that. It was a lot of fun, and there was a great group of kids to work with. Workforce development. You've heard a lot about that today. You're going to hear more about that. Both Barry and Tim touched on this. The reason I bring this up, Sinai is the largest technical school program in Brazil, and it is one that we support in Brazil to a large extent. I think this is a program that is a model for U.S. It's a private institution, and it is funded by industry. And many of our management team in Brazil came up through the Sinai system. They do a terrific job in preparing students to come into the workforce, and we need more of that, obviously, here in North America. I want to walk through this. Chris had asked me a question in preparing for this. You know, how has the business coped during the downturn? And the evolution of the product line, obviously starting in 1880, we concentrated on mechanical hand tools, moved into electronic hand tools and some custom gauging. But I can tell you the company was at a crossroads in 2000 when it came to the metrology business. The employment in the United States for manufacturing employment had dropped about 4 million jobs from 2001 to 2010. We had to take a look at where we were going, the markets we were going to serve. In this next slide, I just want to point out, we played in the upper left-hand quadrant in what I call dimensional metrology, and that's length measurement, diameter measurement, etc. With many of our products in the precision measuring tools, in profile projectors, and some in custom gauging. In the last 10 years, we've entered all the green balloons in terms of test and measurement, which was a big leap for the company to go into test and measurement. Material test and force measurement was developed internally with our team. We're manufacturing that product in Athol. And the other areas that we went into, we did by acquisition. And I want to talk about that in a minute. The high-end metrology products in the upper left-hand quadrant, force material measurement. We entered in the last 3 years, as I said before. This is homegrown development we did in Athol. In the bottom left quadrant, this is vision and optical. That's an acquisition in California that came in 2007. It's interesting to note this particular product in the lower left-hand quadrant really cannibalized a little bit of our optical profile projector business, and it was developed for bone screws, measurement of bone screws in the medical industry. In the top right-hand quadrant, I mentioned custom granite. You guys are probably saying, what in the heck are we doing in the granite business? Granite is one of the more stable metrology products, has a low coefficient of expansion. It's used in high-end metrology applications. This particular unit is sold to the semiconductor business for reticle inspection, for improvement of yields in semiconductors. We do quite well in that business. It's a little different model. We sell that product line direct to industry. And the latest acquisition is laser products. This acquisition, very heavy in automotive. The claim to fame was sidewall tire inspection for imperfections, and particularly for safety in tires. But we also have come out with a product, laser product for extrusions. And I have a video I'd like to show just in a minute to set this up. We are very excited about a product that we've introduced for doing large pipe for the gas and oil exploration. And I'd like to have you run that video real quickly, and I can narrate. There are two systems in this. No moving parts. We're measuring OD and ID, outer roundness, and length measurement. We also have another installation in this facility that's on a continuous pipeline for inline inspection. We're very high in this product line, particularly inline inspection, because in developed countries where labor is so expensive, we think it's important for them to be able to gauge the process prior to having any kind of quality control problems. So we're excited about that product, but it gives you a little bit of idea of how we've tried to move up the technology train in metrology, and we're excited about all of these products. I just attended a National Association of Manufacturers meeting. There were over 300 companies representing automotive, gas and oil, medical devices, pharmaceutical. businesses like ours, which are very small, to companies the size of Caterpillar and DuPont. I sit on the Small Manufacturers Council. What that means is any companies under $1 billion. And I think that the mood has generally been upbeat nationally. We all think that while we may have a rough patch through the first 6 months of calendar 2014, that the prognosis is thumbs up. We think that the next 24 months will be better. I do want to talk to you a little bit about National Association of Manufacturing goals on a national level. I know I'm not talking about the Worcester County, but I think it is important. The manufacturing community simply wants to be the best place in the world to do business. And I'll tell you, from that standpoint, it's really nothing more than structural costs in the U.S. I have to tell you, based on the research that we've done, the U.S. has 20% higher structural costs of doing business than most other developed economies, which puts us behind the 8 ball. If we're going to attract foreign investment, we need to do that. Business innovation, we are a leader, and we need to keep that innovation leadership, and that's being done across the United States, and we must, it's imperative we keep a leadership position. We also want to expand our export markets, and it's important for us to have access to most of the global markets through trade agreements. And lastly, this workforce is a reoccurring theme in every aspect of our business at the local level, at the state level, and at the national level. I have a short video I'd like to show you. I don't know how I'm doing on time. The National Association of Manufacturers put this video together. I think it shows the importance of manufacturing. It was narrated primarily by Doug Oberhelman of Caterpillar, who has been a great leader for the National Association of Manufacturing. So with that, would you please run the video?
America's industrial heartland. Millions clocked in each day at foundries and on assembly lines to make things.
No one ever said manufacturing is easy. I never thought it would be.
And of the extraordinary possibilities that lie within seemingly ordinary men and women.
Manufacturers thrive on challenges. We always have, because we innovate and adapt.
We're on the verge of a manufacturing resurgence in this country. Jobs are going to come back with the right policies. There's a great time in America.
Consider where we are today. Even in a difficult economic environment, manufacturers in the United States are making gains. We're making investments. The manufacturing sector is bigger than ever before, over $2 trillion. The American energy revolution is giving manufacturers a major competitive advantage over our global counterparts. With new advanced exploration and production methods, we're accessing resources that were simply beyond our reach. And as we tap more North American energy resources, we're using this energy more efficiently, doing more with less. Manufacturers are maintaining our innovation edge, embracing technologies like 3D printing and harnessing the power of global connectivity. We're using our employees' ingenuity and talent to solve problems and improve the manufacturing process. We're finding new ways to reach new customers abroad. Exports are at an all-time high. The pieces for a manufacturing comeback are there, and if any country can put them together, it's the United States. Now we need to use the same ingenuity and innovative spirit that is driving manufacturing today to make a difference in our nation's capital. I've been at Caterpillar almost 4 decades. Manufacturing is the only career I've known. Over that time, I've seen a lot of changes. I remember when policymakers were counting down the days until we ran out of oil and natural gas. They were wrong. I remember when pundits were writing manufacturing off, saying our sector was all but lost. They were wrong. Now some folks are saying that manufacturing comeback we've been talking about isn't real. They're going to be wrong once again. Our job as members of the NAM Board of Directors is to convince Washington to move forward with priorities that will get our economy growing and put Americans back to work. It won't be easy, but when have manufacturers ever not been up for challenge?
if any of you are interested in joining the Army of the Association, let me know after the meeting. We need more small businesses to bring their message to Washington. We do that at least once a year, if not twice. I do want to talk to you a little bit just about why I think manufacturing matters, and just a few points here. You heard in the video that we're contribute about $2 trillion to the economy. I think the next point is the most important point, and I talk about additive to the economy. This is manufacturing has the highest multiplier effect of any economic sector. And when you say that, it's $1 spent in manufacturing, another $1.32 was added to the economy. Just in my business alone, in the Worcester area, we consume a lot of services. You know, I have a great relationship with Myra O'Connell. I know David Supernaut's in the audience. So a lot of our legal work is done right here. Our banking relationships, I think I saw Rob Babcock earlier today at TD. Even Euro-American, if you guys are familiar with the Busenberg family, we use Euro-American for a lot of our import-export business. And we do outsourcing to some local machine companies here in the Worcester area in central Massachusetts. The other thing is that manufacturers perform 2/3 of all the private sector R&D in the nation, and that manufacturing alone in the United States would be the 8th largest economy in the world. Something to consider when you're talking about keeping a manufacturing base for the health of the country. So some of the advocacy issues that we go and talk to people on the Hill about nationally. Obviously, the federal deficit, I think, has been a problem and continues to be a problem to move the country forward. Government regulation is really hurting businesses. I would love to have the government really get out of our way. I think we can do a heck of a lot better. I'll give you a little story that pertains to the company here. In 2004, before Sarbanes-Oxley was introduced, our audit fees globally was about $370,000 to $400,000. In 2008, it peaked at $1.5 million. Small business like ours is very difficult to remain profitable when you have that kind of regulation. And I could go on and on about government regulations and how it's affected me, and just think I'm the tip of the iceberg. There's thousands of companies that are dealing with this every day. Workforce development, you heard it loud and clear earlier today, critically important to get the company back on track. We don't have an energy policy, in my estimation, and tax policy is a big problem. We need to simplify, obviously, tax policy, lower corporate taxes, and get a territorial tax system. Even in my business, we're a small business, we're international, 2/3 of my cash is offshore. I'm not bringing that back anytime soon. As you know, corporations are sitting on about $2 trillion in cash today. They're no different than we are. They have much of their capital trapped offshore. And just think if they brought back half of that with no cost to the taxpayer, you'd have probably a $500 billion stimulus package for the country. Those are some of the things that we're bringing to the Hill. And they asked me to do a little business outlook. This is very centric to the Starrett company. And I'm looking at this globally. North America, I'm starting to see some evidence of cash coming off the sidelines just because of our business in high-end metrology. Mexico, we think there's some growth opportunities. There's been a lot of talk about reshoring in manufacturing coming back to the U.S. Now, is that real or isn't it real? I can tell you Grant Thornton did a survey just recently. 37% of executives are rethinking the supply chain. It's the cost of the supply chain, delivery, inventory issues, and quality issues. We think that U.S. will benefit, but we also think Mexico is going to benefit over the next probably
24 months to 36 months, we'll start to see that. South America, obviously, I have a jaundiced view of this. We've been there from 1956. We got a great organization, huge market share, but I think it's long-term positive. They have a lot of social problems, yes, but their economic diversity is so much greater today than it was when we first started in 1956, and I think that's a plus. Chile's always been a stable market for us, and we think that will continue to be so. Europe, we hit bottom. It was a disaster area for our company in Europe. This has been improving. Unfortunately, we consider the Eastern Bloc a growth potential. And what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, we think there's going to be a hangover in Europe. So that doesn't bode well for us. In Asia, China's still a growth market. That's wrong. The GDP is not going up 7%. The GDP will be about 7%, which is down considerably from double-digit growth, but still an opportunity for our company. It's a mixed bag in the rest of Asia. I think Korea and Malaysia are the best bets. My last slide, or two slides, I had Ian Bremner talk to us, who runs Eurasia Group. He's a geopolitical, I call him scientist. He's a great speaker. But if you look in the 6 months trajectory around the world, I just want to point out, not a lot of good news here over the next 6 months if you take a look at that. Yellow is kind of neutral, green's positive. Mexico and a few places around the world are green. A lot of red and negatives. However, if you look at the next 24 months, we're real pleased about this, and I guess, Barry, you and I could argue about how true this really is. But when you look at the 24-month sector, the U.S. is green. Mexico, you take a look at South America, and that's where we have our most strength is in, quite frankly, is in the Western Hemisphere. Now, if you take a look at China, we still consider that huge opportunity for us. In China, we went to China for one reason, that's to grow the brand in China. Brand penetration is important for us. We have over 200 employees now in China, and we're driving hard to bring our brand to China. So with that said, I think over the next 24 months is a little bit rosier prediction for us, and I certainly hope that trickles down here to north central Massachusetts. We want to remain here in Athol and doing what we do every day. Thank you very much. That concludes my slides. All yours.
I got educated. Anybody else? Always good to learn something new about manufacturing, which I find a very critical industry in this region. Interesting note about job growth in the industry. When the state announced yesterday that there was a gain of 3,800 jobs in February, there were 5 industries where the gains were made, and manufacturing was one of them. So that certainly was good news yesterday for the state. Before I introduce Dr. Ralph Lambalot from AbbVie, you will see on, just another reminder, you'll see these cards on your table. If you have any questions to pose for our panelists, if you could please fill them out and turn them in after Ralph's address. And we'll bring them up to the dais and hopefully ask a few of them. Now to introduce Dr. Lambalot from AbbVie.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. And speaking on behalf of about 700 colleagues that are right up here behind us on the Hill at AbbVie, I can tell you we're very, very proud to be a part of the Worcester story, and I'd hope to share some of that with you today. But before I get started, I'd like to do a little name recognition survey. How many of you, and be honest, how many of you have heard the name AbbVie before today? It's good. It's a number. And how many had not? It's about roughly, all right, we're better. We're over the halfway point. So that's good. So I'm gonna get the rest of you over the line today. So AbbVie. We are a a company that has actually was launched in January of 2013, but we were launched with a 125-year history. The company was founded in 1888 as Abbott Laboratories, which I'm sure many of you have heard of before, by Dr. Wallace Abbott. And Dr. Abbott was looking for a way to serve his patients better. So for 125 years, we have had a very patient-centric business that we've been driving, and we continue with that today. Our focus is on specialty pharma. We focus on very complex diseases. These are challenging diseases with great unmet medical need, and we serve this area through a number of different therapeutic areas that I'll tell you about. We have a global presence. We serve patients in over 170 different countries. We have 12 manufacturing facilities around the world, one of them right up here in Worcester. And we have 6 R&D sites also spanning the globe. We have total sales of about approaching $19 billion now. And about half those sales come from a single product, Humira, which is used for, or got its initial approval for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. Here in Worcester, we have 3 primary thrusts to our organization. On the one hand, we are a center of excellence for immunology within AbbVie. And here we research the mechanisms and the targets involved in treating various autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and the list goes on. It's a very large therapeutic area. Additionally, we have a focus on the discovery of novel biotherapeutics. We're a major part of the biotech industry here in Massachusetts and in New England. And as part of that, we drive the discovery not only of small molecules, but also these large molecules, biotherapeutics, which we manufacture here in Worcester to support all of our clinical trials. And my role is in operations. And while my title says doctor, I have a Ph.D. in chemistry, my passion is really manufacturing, Doug, so we share that in common. And it's the manufacturing of these biologics at fairly large scale in fermenters that range from 3,000 liters all the way up to 20,000 liters. And with that 20,000 liter scale, we can generate the global supply for Humira, which approaches several hundred metric tons of material. We have about 700 biopharmaceutical professionals. More than 100 of them are educated to the Ph.D. or MD level that are driving a lot of the innovation and discovery in the therapeutic areas that we research. We've got over 400 with bachelor's and master's level education, and that leaves about 200 that are high school diploma and associate level degree trained. And we have job opportunities that span everything from housekeeping all the way through to the medical oversight of clinical trials. So we span quite a broad swath of employment opportunities for the local economy. Again, our focus is on biologics. We also have small molecule capabilities, and an advent within pharmaceutical treatment is bringing these two together. We have a focus on monoclonal antibodies. Without getting too technical, everybody's familiar with the concept, I think, of an antibody. You have them in your body, part of your normal immune surveillance system that goes out, tries to identify those things that are foreign and clean them out from your body, right? Well, sometimes these processes go awry and they cause autoimmune diseases, and we have ways of treating them. But you can also leverage monoclonal antibodies for delivering specifically a small molecule payload to specific cells, or in the case of oncology, specific tumor types, and take a toxic payload, which if you just administered to that to the body alone, would cause a whole lot of bad side effects. That's the way we used to treat cancer. In the future, the way we will treat cancer is using a very, very specific large molecule, monoclonal antibody, tether to it a small molecule with very robust toxic properties, deliver it directly to a tumor cell, and annihilate that tumor cell, which leads to tumor shrinkage and ideally tumor elimination. And we could be approaching cures for cancer over the next 20 years. So we're very much involved in the global approval process for the manufacture of biologics here in Worcester. We have a history here locally that goes back to 1989, when a German company, BASF, which already had a presence in Massachusetts, in Bedford, manufacturing magnetic tapes. BASF was looking for an opportunity to diversify its business into the pharmaceutical industry. They saw it as a way of sort of leveling out the economic cycle across their portfolio. And they made a significant investment into biotechnology. And here's an example of where good regulations, good government policy can really help an industry blossom. In Germany, it wasn't so easy to start a biotech venture at the time with the green movement, putting a lot of pressure on industry for recombinant DNA research. So BASF was forced to look outside the borders of Germany and came to the United States and looked at the Massachusetts biotech cluster and compared it with what was emerging down at Research Triangle Park and also out in the San Francisco Bay Area. Settled on Massachusetts and started a small operation on Albany Street in Cambridge, and then began looking for some green space for building a manufacturing facility. Had a very, very positive interaction with the city of Worcester, and the company was attracted, was lured here to a nascent biotechnology research park that has its origins in the Michael Dukakis era, which recognized an opportunity of partnering a biotech research park with the UMass, the new UMass Medical Center, which we can see has really blossomed over the past 10 years or so. And if you look at this area, it's very much a robust and well-recognized biotech cluster. In 2001, Abbott Laboratories, recognizing the value of a development candidate that we called the D2E7 at the time, made perhaps one of the most lucrative business development deals ever. For about $7 billion, they purchased all of the pharmaceutical assets that BASF held. Turns out BASF was interested in pursuing pharmaceuticals, but they didn't quite have the patience for the development time and the financial investment required for driving that success in that industry. So they sold it to a company that they felt would be able to take that asset and develop it. And Abbott certainly has done that, taking Humira from approval in rheumatoid arthritis, its first indication, which led to great sales, to now being approved across 9 different indications with 4 more in clinical trials. And this year will reach sales of $10 billion. Research and innovation, of course, these 2 activities are the lifeblood of a pharmaceutical company, responsible for the long-term sustainable growth of any company. And it's difficult to read this, but there are 2 arrows with a breakpoint showing you. There are 2 parts to the process. There's an initial investment, the discovery process, where we're looking at target identification, target validation, lead identification, and learning as much as we can at the cellular level what pathways are involved in a particular disease state. The more we learn about the disease state, the more we learn about the pathway, and the molecules, either small molecules or large molecules in the case of biotherapeutics, we learn on how to modulate that. We come to clarity on what our candidate will be, or a mode of therapy that we want to advance to the clinic, and begin now trying in humans to get a real drug to the market. And that's the clinical development timeline down below. This is where we spent a lot of time up the hill in the process development phase of developing our knowledge of the molecule and the large-scale processes for manufacturing that biologic, using living cells to actually express this protein and then capture it through a very complicated downstream purification process. It's a pretty capital-intensive process. We have 5 different manufacturing trains that we use for manufacturing everything from phase 1, 2, 3, all the way to commercial supplies, just here alone. We also have manufacturing of biologics in Barcelona, Puerto Rico, and we just recently announced an investment in Singapore for expanding that footprint. Just to tell you a bit about the Humira story, I don't think it's widely appreciated that this drug, which is now the #1 selling biopharmaceutical in the world, was actually discovered and developed right here in Worcester, just up the street. And it took about 8 years to get from the identification of the molecule, which occurred in about 1995. And that came after a long incubation period from the discovery of TNF-alpha, which is the target for Humira, to an understanding of the role of TNF-alpha in inflammatory diseases, in autoimmune diseases, and all the different ways it works, both in a natural way within the process and then in a pathological way within the body, and how to control those pathological processes. Probably about 20, 25 years of incubating that knowledge before we discovered the molecule that we would take to clinical development for treatment of the disease. In 2003, we got our first approval for RA, and then since there's just been a stream of expanding the application of Humira to other autoimmune diseases. At AbbVie, we have a focus on many other therapeutic areas in addition to immunology. We've got a very emerging focus on liver disease now, neuroscience, immunology, oncology, kidney disease, and women's health. We're about ready to file for treatment for hepatitis C, which is taking the treatment for hep C from one of a long-term, very chronic disease that leads to death to actually a cure for hepatitis C. There's a latent population of people from the primarily the baby boom era within the states that carry hep C, and there's a push for getting people tested so that they can be aware that they have it. It takes about 20 years for hep C sometimes to gestate and start manifesting its symptoms. But if we can catch those patients, we'll be able to give them a much better outcome over the course of their lifetime. Immunology, I mentioned. Oncology is an emerging area for us, kidney disease and women's health. So we're targeting a number of regulatory approvals between 2014 and 17. We've got multiple phase 3 late-stage development programs currently in play, and over the next year or two, we expect another 7 to advance from proof of concept to phase 3. So a very robust pipeline in development. We augment that internal discovery effort with externally sourced molecules. And this is a key area for us. When you talk about the biotech ecosystem that we have here in the Northeast, partnering, identifying opportunities that other small companies may have developed for treatment of different diseases. We're constantly on the search for them and looking for not just local partners, but looking globally for leveraging those discoveries and bringing them in and helping those companies commercialize those discoveries, translate them from the bench to the bedside and begin serving patients. We've tripled the number of new molecule entities that have been entering development over the past few years, and we're always looking for first-in-class and new technology platforms for treating unmet medical needs. So internally, for our R&D efforts, we're always making significant investments in emerging technologies, always striving for being more efficient. You often hear about the cost of development of a drug, greater than $1 billion to get a drug to approval. And when you start taking into account all of the failures behind that drug that don't make it through clinical trials for either a lack of safety or a lack of efficacy. The costs get even higher for development. We are beginning to become more efficient in our clinical trial design by using adaptive methodologies within the clinic so that we begin to hone in on not just the broad patient population, but understanding what specific subsets of a particular therapeutic population are our drugs more effective in treating. And if we can zero in on those patients, focus the therapies on them, it's more efficient for healthcare overall. For our clinical trials, we are opening the books up to share the learnings of clinical development with a much broader audience. And if you're ever interested in knowing what's happening in the clinic, just go to clinicaltrials.gov and you'll see a list of everything that's going on and links to results for those trials. So again, looking externally, about 90% of our current revenue comes from past acquisitions and in licensing deals. We invest an awful lot in internal R&D, but we recognize that not all the best ideas come from in-house. We're always looking externally for great ideas. 60% of our pipeline is driven by partnerships. The number one molecule that we have, I mentioned Humira, again, was licensed in, well, actually came through the acquisition of BASF, and now has 9 approved indications. And we're getting fast at it, we're getting faster at driving the development of drugs. It took us 3 years to get our HCV treatment from phase 1 to phase 3, and are looking forward to filing that at the end of the year. So that is AbbVie, and I hope now that you've heard the story of who we are and what we do here in Worcester, everybody will be able to raise their hand next time so you're familiar with the name. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ralph. And now for our final perspective, I'd like to introduce Jim Umphrey of Kelleher and Sadowski Associates of Worcester for a perspective from the real estate industry. Jim.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Peter for inviting me to give a little speech today. And I told him when he asked me that this is not my favorite thing to do. So I'm going to give you advice I've given to my wife, who's sitting here a couple times, which is, if you lower your standards of me, you'll be disappointed far less. So at any rate, I think what I'd like to do is break this down into, I'm going to keep this somewhat brief, take a look at really 3 different segments of the commercial real estate market, both in Worcester and going out into the boroughs. So the boroughs, we're going to define as Northborough, Southborough, Marlborough, and Westborough. Those markets actually, to Tim's point earlier, those markets really do compete with us. I think as you head further east, you start to, or south or north, they compete on a lesser level. So from the point of view of Worcester and what's happening, that's really the connectivity to the market. So as you can see, JLL's logo is on here. That's Jones Lang LaSalle. They were kind enough to help me out with some research. So one of the things that you'll find here in the slides, and I'd ask you to be patient with, is that the research on Worcester itself is a little weak. Worcester is not a market that is tracked to the same level as 495 to 128 and into Boston. So some of the numbers that I'm going to give you are a little bit different, but they're really based more on boots on the ground than they are on statistical data that's coming out. So if we looked at the Worcester office market and we kind of focus on the Class A market, it's a very small market. It actually, I would consider it to be probably 5 buildings in downtown Worcester and 9 other buildings that would be within the city limits. So the total square footage is about 1,700,000 square feet. In the downtown, the last new building to be built was in 1992. And on the suburban market, there were 2 buildings built in the last 10 years. One was about 60,000 feet and one was about 50. So the vacancy rate in Worcester is about 8.7%. It's about 150,000 square feet of space that's available, which is a fairly low vacancy rate. The market lease rates are between $19.50 and $22.50 for these buildings. So I would categorize the market for Class A office space in Worcester as being stable. It's also, I would categorize it as pretty small. So on a comparative basis, if you looked at the boroughs market, the Class A market is about 11 million square feet, made up of 83 buildings. It has a vacancy rate of 15.8%, which is about 1,700,000 square feet. So going out to touching 495, you have more vacancy than we have Class A space within the city limits. Lease rates are between $17 and $22, and I would say they're pretty flat, maybe even in some cases declining, and that's really a supply and demand situation. Real estate is really very much driven by supply and demand. So at this stage of the game, if you were looking for 10,000 square feet of space in Marlborough into Northborough, you could probably look at 25 buildings. If you were looking for 10,000 square feet of space in Worcester, you could probably look at 5 buildings. And so that's what really drives the prices down, is the competition. Somebody eventually is going to be extra eager to try to get that deal. So I would categorize the boroughs market as being somewhat stable, but still in a recovery mode. That market being larger really got hit much harder by the recession. They had vacancy over 25% in 2009. So they have made a recovery, but there's still a lot of space to get absorbed. So if we looked at the industrial segment of the market, and we looked at Worcester, if you took the actual data, there is a structural vacancy rate of about 50%. But that data is really not accurate, because what they do is, when they're compiling this data, they're rolling in what I would consider to be functionally obsolete buildings. So they're rolling in buildings that are multi-story, that anybody that was looking to locate a manufacturing or a distribution facility would never even consider. So we believe the vacancy rate is about 20 to 25%. And I would say that in general in Worcester, the market for industrial space has been pretty soft. There's been a few standout companies like Columbia Tech, who have really, blossomed. They're a dynamic company doing contract manufacturing, but there's a lot of manufacturing companies that have shrunk or left. So rates in this market, which through, the mid-2000s were, in the mid-4s, are probably now closer to the mid-3s. So we've seen a real suppression of rates. We are seeing some positive signs, though. We have a client of ours who purchased the old United States Steel at 150 Blackstone River Road. So that's about a 600,000 square foot building that has both manufacturing and warehouse distribution in it. When he purchased it, it had 430,000 feet vacant, and that was in November of 2013. So he purchased it for a pretty low basis, which allowed him to invest in the building, start to do some things that were going to meet the needs of the market. And the result really was, at this point, that he has doubled the size of one of the existing tenants. Another tenant increased by 50%, and we've signed 2 letters of intent totaling 300,000 feet, which, if they go through, which we anticipate they will, both manufacturing companies, we'd be left with about 50,000 feet. So with the right structure and the right creativity, you still can go in and backfill space. In the boroughs market, although it is in the recovery mode, it's doing much better. There's less vacancy. There's only about 10%. The quality of buildings is much higher, better ceiling height, better loading docks, more accessibility. And I would say that, from a rent perspective, they've gone from the mid-fours into, getting upwards towards $6 a foot, which means that at that level, the positive is that you may start to see some new construction coming out of the ground in that particular market. So a fairly new area for us in Worcester is the life science market. So there's really two distinct parks that have been developed over the last 20 years. The main park, which is we're right in the middle of, the biotech park, has really been driven by AbbVie and especially by UMass Medical School. They just purchased 3 buildings from Alexandria Real Estate that are in the park, totaling about 300,000 square feet. When they purchased the buildings, they were about 95% full. And one of the things that's happened is between UMass consolidating in the Sherman Center across the street and Quest Diagnostics moving out to Marlborough, one of the buildings, what used to be known as Biotech 4 of the UMass Medicine Science Center, is going to be available, which is about 90,000 feet. So on the one hand, you could look at that as a negative, but I think on the other hand, one of the things is, in order to get new companies to come into town, in order to be attractive, you need to have product. You need to have something to sell in order to get people in. And so our objective is to get the next AbbVie or the next BASF or whoever to come in and really put a stake in the ground in Worcester. And the good news is that we have a product that is competitive, that's beautiful, and it's connected to one of the best science research areas in the country. So in the boroughs, 10 years ago, I don't think there was any biotech in the boroughs. And since a lot of the companies like HP have moved out, there's been some conversion of space, and they've really started to be a major player in that market. Last year, they leased over 220,000 square feet of new space as life science space. I would say that Marlborough is a major player and is definitely a very strong competitor. I have to go back. Gateway Park, obviously, is the second development in Worcester, which has transformed North Main Street. It has truly got the right name as Gateway Park because it is one of the main gateways into Worcester. And those buildings, there's 200,000 square feet, 600 parking spaces, co-developed by WPI and WBDC, and that is a huge success with 2 more pad sites available. So the last thing that I think this has been touched upon already, but we as people, as Worcesterites, so to speak, I think we many times have a little bit of an inferiority complex about what Worcester is and how well it's doing. And I would tell you, I think if you went across the country to cities of this size, we are the envy of the vast majority of them. We've had cranes up, we've had great development. If you look at City Square, it's not just the development of the Unum building, which was a great thing. And it was a great civic thing that Unum did by staying in downtown Worcester. But it's also about changing the road network. It was about reconnecting Main Street to Shrewsbury Street, which was, Tim clearly was the architect for that. And it did change. If you look at the traffic patterns and you look at what's going to happen now, you're talking about a hotel right behind the People's United building, residential, on the 1 block away. And that's going to mean that's going to open up retail, and you're going to have more of an 18-hour city. With what WBDC is doing, with Quinsigamond Community College, bringing 1,000 kids downtown, clearly what Mass College of Pharmacy has done is just amazing for the city of Worcester. So between Gateway and UMass and all of the investment that's been made, Worcester is doing great. And I would say the prognosis for Worcester, from a real estate perspective and an economic perspective, is very good.
Thanks very much, Jim. Again, a reminder to, if you have any questions for our panelists, please fill out the index cards, one of the index cards that is on your tables. Okay. Anybody sweating here? Okay.
All good.
I don't think I asked hard questions. We'll find out. To start off our panel discussion, Doug, one question for you. The state of global markets for U.S. manufactured goods, such as those your company makes, in your estimation, what could be the growing markets for many manufacturers that they should keep their eyes on over the next 5 years?
Well, I think it's pretty evident for us, Brazil, we're seeing more competition from U.S. companies coming into Brazil. I mean, that's obviously a threat from us, but I mean, there's been a big rush of companies trying to embrace Brazil and what they see as prime opportunities. I'm not real high right now on India and some of the places there, but I will tell you that for us, as I mentioned in my slides, that China, again, we're not interested in just bringing low-cost products, and while we do manufacture products there to be distributed around the world, the huge opportunity in China is that as incomes rise, the Chinese know that they have to stop relying on an export economy and begin to consume products made in that country. And we think that China is going to be an opportunity for us. It's tough competition, but we have a base there and we're growing the infrastructure. Also, as I mentioned, I think that Mexico, I just had my head salesperson from Mexico in Athol last week. We think that Mexico is a good opportunity for us because I know many companies, as I mentioned, are looking at the supply chain. If they feel they need a labor advantage, they would prefer to be closer to the customers to shorten the supply chain. So we think Mexico is an opportunity too.
Thank you. Ralph, a question for you. How important is it for companies such as AbbVie to see high levels of educational achievement in Massachusetts as a way to keep the pipeline flowing with skilled people?
It's certainly critical, I think, for fostering the whole, again, ecosystem for biotechnology. That's, I would say, the level of education in the Northeast and in Massachusetts in particular is one of the hallmarks. That's part of our brand and is a key attraction. Certainly all of the innovations that have emanated from some of the Cambridge schools is what initiated the attraction to the area. But I would say that it's the network of universities at all different levels across the region which is going to sustain it and grow it over the long term. So I think it would be a fallacy for us to think that just by virtue of our location or our proximity to Cambridge that is enough to sustain what we have going. Competition for life sciences, it's global now. You look across, actually about every third year, the Bio Conference comes to Boston, and we open our doors to the entire world who are doing what we're doing right here, trying to attract new businesses, new industries to their backyards. So in order for us to sustain ourselves and to grow and become even more competitive in the future, I think we need to maintain our focus on STEM education at the lower levels. Even before that, focus on literacy within some of the Worcester schools, nutrition, fitness for the younger students, prepare them for rigorous STEM education programs. We've seen recently the Worcester Technical School has gotten a lot of attention and are fortunate to now have attracted President Obama to come speak at their commencement address this June. great press for Worcester and education here. It extends into the community colleges and right into the four-year programs. So I don't think there is any aspect of the education system that you can afford to stop paying attention to. It's the lifeblood of the continuum. I forget what Tim said, about half our, we have this huge population of people between 0 and 14 years. That's the lifeblood of the economy moving forward. It's not just the activity that we do, but it's the people that drive that activity. And if we don't equip them properly with strong education, it's going to be more difficult to compete globally in the future.
Thanks, Ralph. Jim, in your presentation, you alluded to City Square and a lot of stuff that's happening in the downtown area. So we see a lot of emphasis and energy in downtown Worcester. Is that a sign that it's a good time to buy commercial real estate in and around the downtown area as a long-term investment?
I think so. One of the appealing things right now about buying real estate is interest rates are so low that it really becomes extremely attractive. For years, rents in the cost of renting and the cost of owning kind of, really moved up and down together. And with rates as low as they are, it's probably a 30 to 40% reduction if you were using the same multiple. So I do think that starting as ground zero at City Square, which is really, I think that's the center point of where everything's going to grow out from. And yeah, we have a couple buildings on the market that we'd love to talk to people about.
Question for Barry. Of the towns in Massachusetts that you've observed, are there any that come to mind that are doing something truly unique to help spur economic development?
Well, we've been working, as I said, with now 60 towns and cities. I look at a city like Chelsea. Jay Ash is their city manager and has been doing a spectacular job of working with the state and working with our Housing and Economic Development agency to bring in a lot of funds from the state to help rebuild that community. Lynn, we work with Lynn, and when we were brought into Lynn, I have to say Lynn was a basket case. You couldn't get anything done in Lynn. We did the EdSat as we had early here in Worcester with the mayor, Judy Kennedy, with the city council, with the Greater Boston Chamber of, the Greater Lynn Chamber of Commerce. And we then came back, we gave our results to about 60 people. And I was asked by the mayor and the city council president, who actually faced off in the mayoralty election, the mayor won re-election, if I would come and address a special session of the city council, which I did. And I gave them the results and I said, here's what it looks like. You got to market yourself, timeliness of approvals. And I was pleased to see that at their next council meeting less than a week away, they approved the first 43-day expedited permitting in the history of Lynn. So I'm beginning to see communities realizing that they actually can control their own destiny, as you've seen here in Worcester. Other communities are starting to go, for example, toward allowing developers and firms to make one presentation before all the boards in order to get their approvals. They still have to get the approval of the zoning board, of the environmental group, and so forth, but they can make one presentation. That speeds up this permitting very quickly, and a number of communities are doing that. And then finally, we're seeing communities, Metro West, the boroughs, they've been working very closely with the Metro West Chamber of Commerce to market themselves as a region. And so it isn't just Westboro against Southboro against Natick versus Framingham. They're marketing themselves together. So I think we have some lessons from these various communities that suggest when you do it right, when you take control, when you realize that economic development just doesn't happen. It doesn't just happen. It is created by good municipal leadership in both the business and the public working together. We get results.
Thanks very much. I have an audience question for Doug. Doug, we've seen a tremendous decline in entry-level workforce in the manufacturing industry, and who have any manufacturing exposure. How is the sector working with higher education to promote careers in the manufacturing sector?
We're not doing it very well. I can tell you that, either on a national level or even a local level. We are interacting. I can tell you a little what we're doing. I mean, obviously, we're working with technical schools for donations of equipment, measuring products, even cash donations where they make sense. But in regards to the technical training, Worcester Technical School here, we used to be, if I recall, Worcester Trade way back. I mean, when I look at, I've been in the business for a long time, a lot of our older engineers came through the Worcester trade schools. And that's really, sorely lacking. It's, we are trying to reach out to local high schools. I mean, we talked at National Association of Manufacturers trying to get internships for teachers into industry, not just bringing students in, but teachers to understand a little bit about manufacturing. We have an image problem. Manufacturing's got an image problem. There's no doubt about it. The 3 Ds, dark, dangerous. I'm trying to think what the other one is, but it's depressing. I think is kind of where we lack some marketing, and we need to do a better job of that.
I wonder if I could just add to that. Tim mentioned that at the Dukakis Center, we've now done 2 massive studies of manufacturing. And when we started those, I must admit, even though I come out of Detroit and I come out of manufacturing myself, out of Ford, I was going to expect to see that manufacturing was continuing to decline, and one day, by about 2031, we would put the last job to rest. What we found is just the opposite. Manufacturing is stabilizing, and in fact, it stabilized during the Great Recession, which was amazing. But most importantly, when we went out and we surveyed over 700 manufacturers, 10% of all the manufacturers in the state, the number one issue that came up over and over again is, how are we going to replace our current workers when they retire? Because the average age of the manufacturing worker is 51 in the state. We project 100,000 job openings in manufacturing over the next 10 years, about 10,000 a year. We're not producing anywhere near that number. And it is the problem of having a bad rep. It's the cognitive maps we have about manufacturing, because remember when Uncle Sam or Uncle Joe or Aunt Mary worked in manufacturing, it was dark, dirty, you name it. That was true when I worked at the Ford plant in the 1960s. What we're finding today, of course, is that manufacturing has reinvented itself as advanced manufacturing. In fact, the governor and the lieutenant governor created the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative. We're having our second great forum next month. What's interesting about all of that is, how do we actually market manufacturing to our own people, particularly to kids? I'm particularly excited about a little machine shop in Avon, Mass. Accurounds. Tim and I were there and visited with Mike Tomasi and his gang. And he has started going out into the middle schools and the high schools and bringing kids and their parents to see what manufacturing is like. And when I asked Mike Tomasi, tell me about this visits you have, he says, well, we always start in the employee parking lot. I said, the employee parking lot? He says, yes, we wanted to show the kids that our employees are driving, Mercedes, BMWs, Buicks, and once in a while a Chevy. And then we take them into the plant and we show them it's 72 degrees, you can eat off the floor, and the people who are working there, every one of them is working with a high-tech piece of equipment. And all of a sudden, those kids and the guidance counselors in the schools begin to realize there's a future here. And that's the first step. And then if we do the training, including some of the STEM work, and I'm very happy to see that our youngest congressman, Joe Kennedy III, has introduced STEM legislation for nationwide improvement in STEM. This is the kind of thing we need, having manufacturing innovation centers across the country. We have our first 6. That is going to bring manufacturing back so it will have the luster it once had and will attract the kind of people we need into our Voc schools like Worcester, where the president will be, Worcester Tech. This is the future, and you are at the very, very middle of it, right here.
Thanks. Images of a Beamer. Wow.
For a 19-year-old.
Right. My son's 19.
Yeah. I had a VW Bug, which was 7 years old.
There's a question for you, Barry, from the audience. With our prolonged recovery and a lengthier intervention by the Fed, what's the risk embedded in the various economic numbers when the Fed pulls back stimulus?
Well, the question is how quickly they pull it back. And I think in the testimony that Janet Yellen gave yesterday, or the day before yesterday in Congress, she pointed out that we're going to be looking at a broad set of measures of how the labor market is going. I started life as a labor economist. I now do public finance and I do urban. But I've been looking at the unemployment rates for many, many years, and I am actually prepared to begin a referendum for a constitutional amendment that will ban the unemployment rate, because the unemployment rate is such a poor measure of what's really going on in the labor force, yet journalists always lead with that because it's an easy number.
Not always.
Well, not always, but they sometimes do. The fact is that what we need to do is slowly retrench in terms of slowing down the stimulus. We went from 85 billion to about 65 billion to about 55 billion a month, and we'll continue to do that. What makes it possible, though, to maintain that stimulus, which I think has been the major factor for getting us as far along in the recovery as we have, is that we have extremely low inflation rates. And that as long as we have low inflation rates, we can continue to stimulate the economy without great fear of major horrible things happening. Am I worried about another bubble in the housing market? No. The reason, and that's what really catapulted us in the Great Recession, because there are going to be a lot of baby boomers, some of you are in the audience, I'm one of them, who are going to begin to downsize. And we're going to have actually a surplus of suburban single-family homes in the near future. No price pressure there. And we're seeing with the expansion of fracking and natural gas that the energy outlook looks very good too. And those are the two things that really drive inflation, housing prices and energy. Those will keep our inflation rates low along with improved productivity so that we can continue to stimulate the economy and get us back to that long-term GDP growth rate.
Thanks, Barry. I have a question for Ralph, only because you've just been quiet for the last few minutes. There are generally two schools of thought about Worcester's relationship to Boston, especially when it comes to life sciences. And one says Worcester's a suburb of Boston, the other believes that Boston is merely that big thing to the east. I can get away with that, I grew up there. In the life sciences industry, can this region carve out its own niche that can distinguish itself from Boston?
Yeah, I believe it can. And you know, we saw a lot of the different economic factors that make Worcester unique relative to the Boston area, and cost of real estate is certainly one. I think when a company looks at where it's going to situate itself, depending on what type of company it is, there are certainly attractions to being very close in proximity to universities like MIT and Harvard, and sometimes a lot of those companies are formed there because the ideas are generated right there, so they've got to be in proximity to the laboratories where those ideas are coming from. Worcester has a reputation of its own now to capitalize on. You've got Craig Mello right here at UMass, and I think that certainly helped to put Worcester on the map as not just a place in the middle of the state, but it's a place with talent, with intelligence, with a lot of resources to fuel an industry like biotechnology. I think Worcester needs to carve out its niche and can certainly draw on its heritage in manufacturing for making that connection with biotechnology and the life sciences. While you see a lot of movement of the large-scale manufacturing heading out to, say, tax advantage locations, there's still a need for something I would call prototyping. You see it a lot in the tool industry and in the device-centric industries, but it's also true in medicines. All of our clinical trials are essentially prototyping exercises. We need a way to rapidly cycle through that prototyping cycle so that we can get to success much faster. We're fortunate within AbbVie that we have a facility that does exactly that. We have R&D and manufacturing linked in the same building. R&D scientists, manufacturing engineers working together daily to take ideas through translation, through to commercialization. I think that's a sweet spot for Worcester, the translation of ideas to commercial markets.
Jim?
I'd just like to say, as it relates to the real estate component, which is one component, I agree with you, Barry. I mean, having the intellectual capital, from the schools is a critical piece. But from a real estate perspective, the cost of life science space in Worcester is probably in the low to mid 20s a foot triple net. And the same space in Cambridge is probably $60 to $90 a foot. And so especially if you're a smaller company, I think if you're a big company, probably you can overcome the cost because it's all kind of buried in the big picture. But I think that when you're a smaller company, we have seen a lot of companies coming out from Cambridge, coming out here and looking at space in Worcester. Clearly it's happening in Marlborough. And a lot of that is that it's not just the cost of space, it's the cost of living for people, the cost of housing in the Worcester area for the same house that would be in Wellesley is probably, a quarter or, a third. And so it definitely makes a difference. And now that there is, I think UMass Medical School, through, I think Craig Mello is clearly the poster child for it, but they have attracted some outrageous talent over there, and they have really set themselves as a major research institution in the country. And I think that has had so it really becomes, the cost piece is very attractive. The piece that sells it is that you've got credibility now. You've now got the credibility of companies that have come here or people that have come here that have the talent. And clearly somebody like AbbVie is a great example because not only are you here, but you're growing here. And that's a good thing.
Gentlemen, the time for the panel discussion is up, and I want to thank you very much for participating. Before you go, I would like to present a token of our appreciation, presenting each of you with a copy of The Heart of the Commonwealth, which is a book about Central Massachusetts that we published last year. So thank you very, very much. Everybody? Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Doug. Thanks, Ron. Thank you, Jim. Nice job.
Is this working? There it is. Fantastic panel conversation. Thank you all again. And I want to again thank our partners at Chamber of Commerce, Tim and his team, especially Sharon Williams and Christina Andrioli, who worked with us in detail on this event, and Chris Prosser from the Business Journal and her team. Our presenting sponsors, thank you very much, Bank of America and Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Our corporate sponsors, Penta Communications, supporting sponsors, Bolus Lynch, and a special thanks to the Beechwood, to Elevation Exhibits, our team that helps us do the AV. How many times have you been at an event like this where someone tripped over getting the video to work, and that was really pretty seamless? Ron Belay Photography, Curry Printing, Mark Serra Productions, and Revelation Productions. Revelation Productions is, I mix them up sometimes. They're the ones who put on the video show here and all the lighting. So thank you very much. And thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of, enjoy spring.